If you are feeling a little low for this series, then fear not. There is certainly one thing that they seem to be doing well? Hey guys, MasakoX here. It may seem that Haverock and I have been a little down on the series Dragon Ball Super as of late, but we're really not trying to be. It's just with the benefit of hindsight and all, we are seeing more and more things that could have been done better if the producers were given the time to refine things such as workflow and the writing staff and the entire ethos of the whole project. Not only that, but it would have been great to get a start on this project a little sooner for obvious reasons, but we've talked about the animation bugbears so many times, so let's skip over that for now. I think you all know very well by now that as much as we try to remain enthusiastic and optimistic about Super, we have spent a fair amount of time ranting about certain aspects of it, like it falls at the final hurdle that would label it as purely decent or maybe good. Just the little things that keep it from reaching a higher level of polish that it deserves and its legacy deserves. This critique is not entirely without reason though. Both of us want this series to be remembered fondly, and whilst we think it will not be a Dragon Ball GT type of affair, fortunately, it has still not escaped the nostalgia goggles, and in a few years' time, I am sure there will be more stuff to nitpick about this particular product. One of the things that really springs to mind here for myself, in particular, is that mismanagement was the name of the game at the start of this whole chestnut back in 2015. And what they really failed to capitalize on was Dragon Ball's legacy, which is very hard to do because of how big the legacy is. This is Dragon Ball for Pete's sake! But where does this all come back to? Who is the one to point fingers at? Well, a place that we call the Triple T. That is Toriyama, Toyotaro, and lastly Toei. These three are the driving forces behind the majority of the Dragon Ball content that you see on the small screen, and of course on streaming services these days because, you know, we're trying to cut the cord as it were. And that does sort of include Super Dragon Ball Heroes as well, despite that being a Bandai commission mostly. Toei was still in charge of the animation production, so it's on both of them in a way for how that turned out. A lot of the actions of the Triple T do indeed have to be criticised here. Japan is steeped in tradition, and things change very slowly in that market. Slow and steady wins the race and all that. Don't rock the boat. And despite Toyotaro coming in to add some youth and vigour to proceedings, he is still bound by the vision of the old guard, such as Toriyama, his own master, Tadayoshi Moro for the longest time, one of the legendary character designers who has now since faded away into irrelevance, sadly, through his own means and obstinance, as well as the higher-ups of Toei. Out of this team, all we can say is that this most recent iteration of Dragon Ball is a pretty mixed bag. That being said, there might have been something that we need to give them credit for, most specifically Toyotaro within this amount of tea. A fulfillment of a wish that we had back in the day, earlier on in these discussions when Super hadn't really gotten into the Tournament of Power arcs just yet. In fact, we made a whole video about that, why we didn't get an expanded universe within Dragon Ball Super, and why it needed to happen. But it seems that, inadvertently, almost without realizing it, we are starting to see that change, and perhaps see some innovation within the sphere of Dragon Ball, harking back to previous types of aliens and showing more of them instead of just one or two. Actually showing civilizations that aren't the subject of Frieza's attention. Do you guys also remember how mad we were about the whole 28 planets chestnut, as it was pretty random and felt conflicting with everything that we know? Not only that, but it also seemed to add even more negative aspects towards an already beleaguered character. Shin, the Supreme Kai of Universe 7, had managed to show us just how much of a rubbish overseer he was. The job of the Supreme Kai is to strike a balance with their counterpart, the god of destruction Beerus. However, Shin had taken his role of not interfering too far, and simply allowed Beerus to run rampant throughout his space, and when Beerus got bored and fell asleep, Frieza was allowed to just take his place, roam free and expand his empire. It threw the scheme out of line and everything became irreversibly skewed. The only reason that Universe 7 wasn't the bottom of the list in the entire multiverse was that Universe 9 was already a very sad place to be in. Shin got lucky there. One thing we need to clarify here. Just because we said 28 planets exist, that doesn't mean that there are only 28 species left of a sentient persuasion. Almost feeling like a throwaway line of sorts, not to be taken seriously, could refer to 28 civilizations, as well as multi-species organizations, such as the Freezer Force or the Galactic Patrol. Not just, species, it could mean these companies. As we very well know, there are many different types of aliens working under those two particular umbrellas. Perhaps those could count like their own types of civilization. The Galactic Patrol and Freezer Forces are very vast indeed. Their turf in a way could be spanned over light years, not just one planet or something like we would normally expect. But even if you took those two collectives into consideration with all of this, that number of 28 still feels pretty low. Okay, Masako, your notions are still very down towards the Triple T. What are you trying to get at here? Well, we have reached that point. In what has turned out to be a very unexpected twist, something has started to happen within the Dragon Ball universe as we know it, and it seems like something that we thought would never happen. The likes of Toyotaro are giving examples of aliens that we already know. These types of beings go all the way back to the 90s to the original Dragon Ball Z, when the idea of space in that show was still relatively fresh. Naturally, since this is a long-running series, things started out slowly with the likes of Jimeze and Zabuto in the Tournament of Power presenting Universe 2. It reintroduced Yardratians and Tuffles to the franchise, or Sufurians depending on your persuasion. Not just some passing reference or some kind of retrograde flashback like with the former on Goku's part. Yeah, that was cool and all, but we weren't done yet. Things started to be pretty visible in the Broly movie. We were not done yet at all. We were going to get even more examples of recalling types of beings from the past instead of just simply making new examples just for the sake of it. You see, as much as some of us weren't that happy about canonizing Dragon Ball Minus within the movie's flashback sequence of Planet Vegeta, it was one of the most beloved moments in that movie. It did do a good job, and it gave us more of Dragon Ball Minus to work with. Instead of just 20 pages of very rushed story, we got 25 minutes or so of extra context to go with it, and expanded upon this version of Bardock. It made the whole experience feel less bitter in the long run, I think. Sure, Bardock might have lost his edge a little bit, as well as his trademark bandana, but what we've gotten has really surprised a lot of people who wanted to put some sense of perspective for this side story in the Dragon world proper. It managed to do an okay job, but that doesn't mean that we are going to forget that Bardock, father of Goku, existed. You simply cannot do that. It's also kind of weird that despite Toriyama saying that he loved that special, he chose to basically rewrite it anyway, almost entirely. The main focus of Minus being used as an initial construct for this sequence, aside from Toriyama being able to reuse something he'd already written in Minus, just recycling, was that we started to get some world-building fluff in the movie. We got to see more normality with one of the most obvious groups of people within the Dragon Ball series, the Saiyans. Finally, we saw how Saiyan society operated, and that certain citizens performed different roles. They weren't all just warriors like we'd come to expect. It makes sense, really. For a society to work well, or at least semi-coherently, you need a mix of people with different skills like engineers, marshals, scientists, or scientists, and any kind of thing, really. If you just simply had warriors and nothing else in the same space, nothing would get done aside from fights. That's not conducive for a society. Suddenly, out of all of this, we are starting to feel as if Toriyama has started to actually care about sorting everything out. All the missing lore and all the missing ideas that make a type of people an actual society that could exist. At last, we could stop for a little while and observe how the society worked, making them more believable. We weren't just watching Saiyans running around before Frieza blew them up. We got to see how their operation worked under the Cold and Freezer Force. What they would do instead of just simply sending out babies into space to conquer other planets. It felt more substantial. But of course, that could have been just a fluke from Toriyama, wanting to sort out the most marketable species of the series. It was kind of easy. It might have just been some bullet points given to the team over at the main screenplay department, filling in the gaps. We may never know, but what we do know is that it was very much welcome in our eyes. Despite this though, it's still making the glaring elephant in the room more obvious. The humans are sort of forlorn. The humans have been very much overlooked, seriously so as of late, and even though they technically had some presence in the Tournament of Power saga, they didn't do as well as we wanted them to. But with the coming of the Moro arc, and it now starting to head towards some kind of conclusion, it seems that this is not just a temporary trend, that people from the past are getting their dues once again. In fact, as of late, we have a lot of references to past arcs, and we even see some faces, or similar ones, that we haven't seen for a very long time, starting to re-emerge. Or as in the case of Barzon, yeah, I know his actual name is Yuzun from the latest chapter of the manga, we have confirmation of an entire species still existing and kicking within the Dragon World in the present day. Albeit one from a galactic prison, but at least we know that Zarbon isn't a mutant and just one person. He is from a different planet. Also, how cool was it to see Namek again playing some kind of deep and significant role within a particular story, instead of just simply being there as a passing reference or a means to use Dragon Balls? Most importantly, how awesome does it feel to see Yardrat in greater detail? How spectacular is it to understand what Goku went through in that flashback, as opposed to just hearing about it? Oh, that's where he got instant transmission, and that's that. How great was it to see even more of Dragon Ball Online become relevant within the main storyline with the different types of Yardratians? In short, very. For the longest time, we thought we would never see that place again or hear from it, that most of the alien races are one and done monster of the week type of things, and their place in the universe doesn't really matter, Yardrat being the biggest example of all of this. But they are finally starting to matter. Making certain creatures reappear gives us a sense of continuity, and we feel that Toyotaro might be the one who understands this most from the fan's point of view. He used to be a fan. He would remember these stories well and what kind of impact these beings had within the show when he was just a boy. Dragon Ball was for the longest time a roller coaster type of story. You didn't really look to the sides, but now with the two newest installments out, it seems that at least Toriyama and Toyotaro together are beginning to understand the value of expanding the world they already got instead of just adding to it. There is more of a plan than ever with that franchise, instead of just the riding by the seat of one's pants type of thing that Toriyama had followed since he started back in 1984. Of course, sometimes it means that we get some retcons occurring that we don't like, or some confusion starting to settle in with some information being incorrectly recalled, but how cool did we feel when the whole Mirrors thing was confirmed? We suspected it was coming for a while, but it felt rewarding, you know? Check out our video about Mirrors' potential identities from a few weeks ago for a better sort of context towards this supposition. Our wait was rewarded well. Like, the whole Angel thing isn't just a dropped plot point, it so often happens in Dragon Ball Super. This one though was carried through and was added to throughout the entire Moro arc thus far, instead of just being forgotten near the start, like we were supposed to forget about it. Like what the manga author of JoJo likes to do. Araki is very sneaky like that, isn't he? In 2020, characters like the Grand Supreme Kai still matter. For years, he was just a reference in a flashback, but to see him interact with our present day characters directly was such a revelation and a breath of fresh air for a character we thought was a lost cause. Boo was a game changer in the first part of the Moro arc, for sure. That Zunseijin, or Zunians, had their little appearance in the story as well. That was a nice touch too. Pui Pui mattered, guys. Not to mention that we now know that there are Metal Men in Universe 7 as well as Universe 6, or that 7-3 may or may not have something in common with Hit. Seeing those designs reappear might give us the feeling of people recycling ideas, sure, but to us, it feels like Toriyama and Toyotaro finally feel comfortable within the Dragon World to just evolve what they've got, like they want to stay there and unpack their bags. That's okay. I want those two to evolve existing ideas and give them more meat. In the case of Toriyama, it took some time, almost 4 decades, but the Dragon World is finally starting to shape up as an actual universe with an actual lore, and not just a big bag of retcons and potential retcons. To us, this might also be the reason why we love the Moro arc so much. If only this whole story would then go on to push the Triple T into giving us some side stories as well as the main story, we'd be absolutely overjoyed. Hopefully this trend will carry on into the future. After all, there are still some things to be seen on Earth, and seeing that happen in a certain game is willing to give us some fluff lore centered around that, we feel that our pleas to expand the Dragon Ball universe have finally been listened to. Now, just give us something cool for the humans, Triple T, and we are up to starting some kind of brand new friendship. So what do you guys think? Do you feel that the expanded universe is starting to take shape finally? Might we even see more blasts from the past return before our very eyes? Leave a comment below and let's get this discussion going. And I shall see you in the next video. Catch you later.